Turning now to a retreat that Vladimir Putin likely did not expect. Russians fleeing Russia. Apparently, there's an alarming brain drain going on right now. That country's smartest minds, they want out of there. Since the invasion of Ukraine, more than 200,000 of them, those Russians fleeing their country, traveling to any other nation that will allow them in without a visa. And these are not your typical refugees, folks. Many of them are highly educated and from, you guessed it, the tech sector, which is exactly the kind of brain that the U.S. and other countries would really love to have working for them. And the brain drain isn't letting up either. One Russian trade group is estimating that another 100,000 tech workers could leave Russia next month. I'm joined by Jason G. Weiss. He is a retired FBI supervisory special agent, currently a cybersecurity attorney at the law firm of Faegre, Drinker, Biddle, and Reed. Jason, that is astounding to hear that many people in that caliber of, society want out of Russia. But I mean, can Putin afford to lose people like that? It seems to me that his strongest suit is the cyber power he has.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ashleigh. And I think first thing I would say is the people that are leaving are not the cyber gangs, the ransomware gangs, stuff like that. Those folks get paid in cryptocurrency and other types of currency. So I don't think they're really feeling the pinch. I think you have a lot of folks trying to make a living. They're having a hard time with the sanctions, getting paid. My question would be, are they leaving with their families or are they leaving alone? Because Russian government has never been great about letting the families go as well, because that's kind of a counterweight to make sure these folks come back when they need them back. And the other question I would ask and I would wonder about is, I'm sure the FBI's counterintelligence squads are watching this with great interest, because how many of these folks are potentially Russian intelligence service folks trying to figure out ways into the country in order to gather intelligence and do it under the veil of claiming refugee status. So those are the couple questions that pop in my mind right off the bat.
Well, and that's the first thing I thought of as well. Like, oh, great, we could get some spectacular minds working for this country instead of working for that country and messing with our next election. But at the same time, how do you prevent them from coming in under the guise of being, cyber refugees, and they are actually cyber spies? How do you watch them that closely?
I don't think you can. I mean, the bottom line is you have to rely on the Russian government to give you the information on who these people are and what their background is, and they're certainly not going to do that. So you either have to take them as is and run the risk that you're getting the good with the bad. And I don't know that there's a real easy way when you're dealing in this kind of situation and this kind of chaos to be able to do that. I mean, I would bet, I'm part of my retired pension that there's a good portion of those folks are Russian intelligence services. And what a great way to get into the U.S., get into certain cyber industries. And I would be somewhat hesitant if it were me and I were hiring, looking to hire these people. I'm sure a lot of them are leaving because they just can't get paid because of all the sanctions. But like I said, if the families stay behind, these people aren't going very far. They're not going to leave their families behind. And if they're going, they're just going to try and make money and send the money back to Russia anyway.
Oh, that's interesting. So, if you look back after the breakup of the Soviet Union, there was hyperinflation after the brain drain there, and it also led to a real, scientific shaping of our communities over here. So there was a real bonus to having that happen. Do we expect the same kind of model to repeat itself this time?
I'm sure there'll be some bonus because they have a fantastic cyber presence in Russia. They have some great people. Like I said, you're not getting the cyber threat actors. I don't believe they're the ones coming over because I think they're not worried about eating and feeding their families quite like the other folks, because they're making all their money off of, doing ransomware and other types of cyber attacks. I think you make a great point. There is going to be some advantage. Like after World War II, when everybody went after the German scientists, this is probably not a whole lot different. But once again, we don't know exactly who we're getting. Are we getting the great minds out of the Russian military or the Russian government, or are we just getting a bunch of IT workers who are looking to trying to figure out a way to feed their family? I mean, you ask great questions, but I don't know that we have great answers at this point. I think it's just too soon to know. I'm sure this does not help Putin, because one of the things he's been trying to do for a long time is something called Splinternet, which is kind of break off the Russian internet from the rest of the world in order, just like the Chinese are trying to do, to trying to control the flow of information, control what the Russian citizens get to see on the internet. And to do that, he needs a very dedicated and sizable IT force. So I'm sure in this regard, this is not helpful for him. But at the end of the day, I don't know that I see the danger to him that maybe others do. I don't think, say what you want about Putin, but he's not going to let these people go if he really needed them. I mean, he has the capability of preventing them from leaving if that's what he wanted to do. If he's letting these people go, it's because he wants to or doesn't care about them, and he doesn't see a threat to the Russian cyber offensive or defensive capabilities, in my opinion.
That's hard to believe when you see the number, 200,000 already and another 100,000. I mean, 300,000 of the top echelon of the educated and the cyber smart. I don't care if they're IT or not. That just sounds like a dangerous number to allow to leave. But you make a great point. He's no dummy.
At the end of the day, that's a lot of people, but the Russians have hundreds of millions of residents just like we do, and they could probably absorb something like that. But, I could be wrong. I mean, it's all speculation at this point, but I don't believe that if these people were vital to the Russian government's cyber offensive or defensive capabilities, that they would be allowed to leave the country, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't believe that's the way things roll in Russia.
Well, what about the way things roll here? Should we be loosening up our visa requirements, so that we can absorb people like that, even if they are, good IT workers as opposed to the top in the, security services, but also prevent them from going to China or India and then working for those countries? Yeah. Is it a good idea to take the big risk to ensure that whatever gems are in that mass don't end up in another country, doing naughty things to us?
That's a great question, and I think that probably has some merit. I'm sure there's some folks we would love to have. Like I said, the question is, are we able to vet those people before we allow them in? Because, I mean, if they're part of the Russian intelligence service, and I would bet something that they are, at least some of them are, obviously not all of them, but yes, I mean, it's a calculated risk, and that's one for the politicians to have to make. But I agree. I mean, we don't want them going to China or India or anywhere else. But at the end of the day, I'd like to know who these people are before I would make that decision. I mean, like I said, I just don't believe that, I could be wrong, but I just don't believe that Putin would let people that he felt was critical to the Russian government or the Russian cyber landscape leave the country. He just wouldn't do it. I mean, it's not beyond him to use their families as a way to keep these people in check.
I've done it before. Jason G. Weiss, thanks so much. Nice to have you. Appreciate this.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time, Ashleigh.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.